The stars looked cold and distant through the viewing port as Commander Vexara studied the blue planet below. Earth hung in space like a marble, swirled with white clouds and deep oceans. She had conquered 12 worlds before this one. Each time, the pattern was the same. Her people would arrive, study the native species for a few days, then crush any resistance with superior technology. The Zephyrian Empire had been expanding across the galaxy for 2,000 years, and no primitive world had ever posed a real threat. This mission should be simple. The humans were barely capable of reaching their own moon. Their weapons were crude chemical explosives and metal projectiles. According to the intelligence reports, they had not even developed energy shields or plasma weapons. The invasion fleet was already 3 months into their journey from the homeworld. Vexara just needed to confirm that Earth's defenses were as weak as expected. "Commander, we are maintaining perfect stealth above the northern continent," reported Officer Kellen from his station. The bridge of the Silent Talon was quiet except for the soft hum of advanced systems. Through their cloaking technology, they were completely invisible to human detection methods. Vexara nodded and activated the holographic display. The surface of Earth appeared before her in perfect detail. Cities glowed like tiny jewels across the continents. She could see the movement of their primitive aircraft and the heat signatures of their military installations. Everything looked exactly as predicted. The humans were completely unaware that death watched them from above. "Begin deep scans of their major population centers," she ordered. "I want detailed analysis of their military capabilities and population density. The High Command expects a full report before the main fleet arrives." The scanning took several hours. The results confirmed what the Zephyrians already believed. Human technology was thousands of years behind their own. Their largest weapons could barely scratch the hull of a Zephyrian fighter craft. Their armies moved slowly on the ground using wheeled vehicles and crude flying machines. This would be the easiest conquest in the Empire's history. "Commander," called Officer Zethra, from the sensor station, "I am detecting an isolated human signature in the northern wilderness region. No settlements within 100 kilometers. Single individual moving through dense forest terrain." Vexara studied the readings with interest. Most of their intelligence about humans came from observing their cities and military bases. Here was a chance to study one of them in isolation, away from their technology and support systems. Perfect for understanding what these creatures were really like when stripped of their mechanical advantages. "Track this individual. Deploy micro-surveillance drones for close observation. I want to know everything about how they behave in their natural environment." The target was a human male moving through the Alaskan wilderness with only basic equipment. According to their scans, he carried simple tools, preserved food, and what appeared to be a small shelter. No advanced technology at all. No communication devices linking him to the larger human civilization. He was alone and vulnerable. Exactly the kind of specimen they needed to study. Jake Morrison had no idea that alien eyes watched his every step. He moved through the forest with steady purpose, following game trails and natural pathways deeper into the wilderness. His backpack contained everything he needed for a week alone in the mountains. After 3 tours overseas and too many missions, he could not talk about. He needed this time away from civilization. The silence of the deep woods was the only thing that helped quiet the noise in his head. The aliens watched him make camp as the sun set behind the mountain peaks. They recorded how he selected his site, built his fire, and prepared his simple meal. To Vexara, his actions seemed inefficient and primitive. He could have been dropped anywhere on this planet by aircraft, but instead, he chose to walk for days through dangerous terrain. He could have brought advanced equipment to ensure his comfort and safety, but he carried only basic tools. The behavior made no sense to creatures who valued efficiency and technology above all else. "Analysis indicates the subject follows predictable patterns," reported Kellen. "He maintains consistent movement speed, shows basic survival knowledge, and appears to pose no threat to observation efforts. Recommend continued monitoring to gather behavioral data." Through the night, the aliens watched Jake sleep beside his small fire. Their thermal sensors showed his body temperature, heart rate, and breathing patterns. Everything appeared normal for the human species. He seemed no different from the billions of others they had observed in the cities below. Perhaps slightly more physically capable due to his outdoor activities, but nothing that would concern a Zephyrian invasion force. The forest around Jake's camp was alive with sounds that the aliens did not recognize. Owls called from the darkness. Small creatures moved through the underbrush. The micro-drones recorded everything but focused primarily on the sleeping human. To the Zephyrians, this wilderness seemed chaotic and unpredictable. Their own homeworld had been tamed long ago. Wild animals were extinct. Nature existed only in carefully controlled preserves. They could not understand why any intelligent being would choose to sleep alone in such a place. As dawn approached, Jake stirred and began his morning routine. The aliens continued their observations, taking detailed notes about human behavior patterns. Soon they would have enough data to satisfy the High Command. This single primitive human would represent his entire species in the invasion planning reports. His weakness would be used to calculate the minimal force needed to subdue Earth's population. None of them suspected that Jake Morrison was about to demonstrate something that would change everything the Zephyrian Empire thought they knew about humans. In a few hours, this ordinary man would face a test that would terrify creatures from across the galaxy and save his world from invasion, without ever knowing it. Jake Morrison woke before sunrise on his third day in the wilderness. The air was crisp and cold, carrying the scent of pine and mountain snow. He rolled out of his sleeping bag and stretched, working the stiffness from his muscles. Above him, invisible alien eyes watched every movement through micro-drones no larger than insects. Commander Vexara studied the human from her position on the bridge of the Silent Talon. For 2 days she had watched Jake move through the forest with growing confusion. His behavior patterns were unlike anything in their databases. Most primitive species showed fear when alone in dangerous territory. They moved quickly, sought shelter, avoided potential threats. This human did the opposite. Jake walked slowly through areas where their scanners detected large predators. He stopped frequently to examine animal tracks and droppings. He knelt beside streams to study the water and the creatures living in it. His movements were deliberate and controlled, as if he owned this entire wilderness. The aliens could not understand this strange confidence. "Commander, the subject appears to be following a predetermined route," reported Officer Kellen. "But our analysis shows no logical destination. He is not moving toward any human settlement or resource cache." Vexara watched Jake break camp with military precision. Every item had its place. Every action served a purpose. He moved like a soldier, but soldiers were supposed to avoid unnecessary risks. This human was walking directly into one of the most dangerous wilderness areas on his planet, apparently for no reason except personal choice. "Continue monitoring. Deploy additional micro-drones. I want complete coverage of his activities." The invisible alien watchers followed Jake as he climbed higher into the mountains. The terrain became rougher and more dangerous. Loose rocks and steep slopes would challenge even their advanced hover technology. Yet the human navigated these hazards with surprising skill. He tested each handhold, chose his path carefully, and maintained steady progress despite the difficult conditions. Jake paused at the edge of a small clearing and knelt to examine something in the dirt. His fingers traced large paw prints pressed deep into the soft earth. The tracks were fresh, maybe a few hours old. He looked around the clearing with heightened awareness, his body language changing from relaxed to alert. The aliens recorded everything, but did not understand what they were seeing. Their scanners showed that the tracks belonged to a massive bear, one of Earth's largest land predators. Any sensible creature would retreat immediately. Instead, Jake studied the prints more carefully and seemed to be calculating the animal's size and direction of travel. "The subject has detected signs of a large predator," reported Zethra from the sensor station. "Recommend increasing surveillance to record his flight response for behavioral analysis." But Jake did not flee. He stood slowly and adjusted his backpack straps. His hand moved to the knife on his belt, checking that it was secure. Then he continued forward, following the same path as the bear tracks. The aliens watched in amazement as this primitive human deliberately pursued one of his planet's apex predators. For the Zephyrians, this behavior was incomprehensible. Their own species had evolved on peaceful worlds where cooperation and intelligence had eliminated the need for physical conflict. When they encountered dangerous situations, they used technology to avoid or eliminate threats from a safe distance. The idea of a soft-bodied creature deliberately seeking confrontation with a larger, stronger opponent was beyond their understanding. Jake moved through the forest with increased caution now. He stopped frequently to listen and scan his surroundings. The alien's sensitive equipment picked up his elevated heart rate and the subtle changes in his breathing patterns. But instead of fear, the readings suggested a state of controlled readiness. This human was preparing for battle. The bear had been feeding in a berry patch about half a mile ahead. Jake's path would take him directly through the animal's territory. The aliens calculated the encounter would happen within the next hour. They prepared their recording systems to document what they expected would be a brief and violent demonstration of Earth's food chain in action. Commander Vexara felt a strange mixture of anticipation and concern. This human had become more than just a research subject. His unexpected behavior challenged everything the Zephyrian Empire thought they knew about primitive species. If he died in the coming encounter, they would lose valuable data. If he somehow survived, it would raise serious questions about their invasion planning. All stations maintain maximum surveillance. This encounter may provide crucial intelligence about human survival capabilities. Jake crested a small ridge and stopped. Below him, in a natural clearing surrounded by berry bushes, was the largest bear he had ever seen. The massive Kodiak stood nearly 9 feet tall and weighed over 1,200 pounds. Its thick brown fur rippled over powerful muscles as it fed on the ripe berries. The bear had not yet noticed the human observer above. The aliens recorded the moment with perfect clarity. Their sensors measured both creatures down to the smallest detail. The bear possessed overwhelming advantages in size, strength, and natural weaponry. Its claws were as long as human fingers and sharp enough to tear through tree bark. Its bite force could crush bones like twigs. Against this living tank, the human appeared pathetically vulnerable. Jake should have backed away slowly. He should have given the bear plenty of space and found another route through the mountains. Any rational creature would avoid this confrontation. Instead, Jake did something that horrified his alien observers. He began moving closer to the bear. The descent into the clearing was careful and deliberate. Jake used every bit of cover available, moving from tree to tree like a hunter stalking prey. But he was not the predator in this situation. He was walking into the domain of one of Earth's most dangerous animals with nothing but a knife and determination. The bear sensed movement and raised its massive head. Small, intelligent eyes scanned the forest edge until they found Jake. For a moment, both creatures remained perfectly still, measuring each other across 30 yards of open ground. The aliens held their collective breath, waiting to see which one would make the first move. Then Jake stepped forward into the clearing and the bear rose up on its hind legs to its full, terrifying height. The bear dropped back to all fours and let out a deep growl that rumbled through the clearing like thunder. Jake felt the sound in his chest, but he did not move. His hand rested on his knife handle, and his eyes never left the massive animal. 30 yards separated them, but that distance could disappear in seconds if the bear decided to charge. On the bridge of the Silent Talon, Commander Vexara watched in stunned silence. Every instinct developed over millions of years of evolution told her that the human should run. Flight was the only logical response when facing a superior opponent, yet Jake Morrison stood his ground like he was made of stone. Commander, the human's vital signs show extreme stress, but no panic response, reported Officer Zethra. His heart rate is elevated but steady. Brain activity suggests tactical thinking rather than fear paralysis. The bear swayed from side to side, testing the air with its sensitive nose. It caught Jake's scent and huffed loudly. This was not prey behavior. Prey animals ran or froze with terror. This strange creature was doing neither. The bear had claimed this berry patch as its feeding ground, and it would defend the territory from any intruder. Jake slowly reached into his pack and pulled out a thick branch he had collected earlier. The wood was hard and heavy, about 3 feet long. Not much of a weapon against 1,200 pounds of muscle and claws, but better than nothing. He gripped it like a club and took another step forward. The aliens could not believe what they were seeing. This primitive human was actually advancing toward certain death. Their sensors showed that his body was flooded with stress chemicals, but instead of triggering a flight response, these chemicals seemed to be enhancing his focus and reaction speed. His movements became more fluid and controlled as the danger increased. The bear made its decision. With a roar that shook the trees, it charged across the clearing. The ground trembled under its massive paws as it closed the distance in seconds. Jake had faced enemy soldiers before, but nothing had prepared him for the sight of half a ton of furious predator bearing down on him. At the last possible moment, Jake threw himself to the side. The bear's charge carried it past his original position, but the animal was surprisingly agile for its size. It spun around with deadly speed and swiped at Jake with claws that could tear through steel. Jake rolled behind a large boulder, just as the claws raked the air where his head had been. The aliens recorded every second of the encounter. Their analysis showed that Jake had avoided the attack by less than 6 inches. Any other species they knew would have been killed instantly. But this human seemed to possess an uncanny ability to judge distance and timing under extreme pressure. Jake used the boulder for cover and struck out with his makeshift club. The heavy wood connected with the bear's shoulder, producing a solid thud that would have broken bones in a smaller animal. The bear barely noticed the impact. It rose up on its hind legs again and brought both massive paws down toward Jake's position. Jake dove away from the crushing blow and came up running. The bear's claws left deep gouges in the rock where he had been crouching. He sprinted across the clearing using his superior speed and agility to stay ahead of the larger animal. The bear followed, roaring its fury at this irritating creature that refused to die. The human demonstrates remarkable spatial awareness and reaction time, observed Kellen, but these defensive maneuvers cannot continue indefinitely. The bear has superior stamina and will eventually connect with an attack. Jake seemed to understand this as well. Pure evasion was not a winning strategy. He needed to find a way to hurt the bear badly enough to make it reconsider the fight. His military training had taught him to look for weaknesses in any opponent, no matter how powerful they seemed. The bear charged again, and this time Jake did not dodge completely clear. Instead, he waited until the last moment and then stepped aside while swinging his club at the animal's front legs. The impact threw the bear off balance, and it stumbled sideways into a tree trunk. Jake pressed his advantage immediately. While the bear was recovering, he drew his knife and lunged forward. The blade was only 6 inches long, but it was razor sharp and designed for combat. He drove it deep into the bear's flank before dancing away from its counterattack. The bear roared in pain and rage. Blood flowed from the wound, staining its thick fur. For the first time in the fight, it seemed to realize that this small opponent could actually hurt it. The easy victory it had expected was turning into a real battle. Commander. Vexara found herself leaning forward in her chair, completely absorbed by the combat. Nothing in Zephyrian history had prepared her for this display of primitive savagery. Her people solved conflicts through negotiation and superior technology. Physical combat was something that happened to lower species, not intelligent beings, but Jake Morrison was clearly intelligent. Every move he made showed careful calculation and tactical thinking. He used the terrain to his advantage, struck when opportunities presented themselves, and maintained perfect awareness of his surroundings despite the life-or-death struggle. This was not mindless violence. This was warfare at its most basic and brutal level. The bear's next attack was more cautious. It had learned to respect the human speed and the sharp pain of his knife. The two opponents circled each other like ancient gladiators, each looking for an opening. Blood dripped from the bear's wound, while Jake's shirt was torn and dirty from his desperate dodges. The fight had already lasted longer than anyone could have predicted. Most encounters between humans and large predators ended in seconds, usually with the human as the victim. But Jake had turned this into an extended battle of wills and skill. The aliens watched in growing amazement as minutes passed, and both combatants remained standing. Then the bear made a mistake. Frustrated by its inability to catch this quick opponent, it reared up for another crushing attack. Jake saw his chance and took it without hesitation. He rushed forward and drove his knife upward with all his remaining strength, finding the gap beneath the bear's raised front leg. The blade sank deep into vital organs. The bear's roar turned into a gurgling cough as blood filled its lungs. It staggered backward, confusion replacing rage in its small eyes. After a few more steps, the massive predator collapsed to the ground and lay still. Jake Morrison stood over his fallen opponent, breathing hard and bleeding from several minor wounds. He had just accomplished something that should have been impossible. Armed with only primitive weapons and his own determination, he had defeated one of Earth's apex predators in single combat. In the silent depths of space, an entire alien crew stared at their screens in shock, knowing they had just witnessed something that would change the course of galactic history. Jake Morrison stood over the dead bear for several minutes, catching his breath and letting the reality of what had happened sink in. His hands shook slightly from the adrenaline still coursing through his system. Blood from small cuts on his arms mixed with sweat. But he was alive. The massive predator that had seemed unstoppable just minutes ago now lay motionless at his feet. On the bridge of the Silent Talon, complete silence had fallen. Commander Vexara stared at the display screen, unable to process what she had just witnessed. In all her years of conquest, she had never seen anything like this primitive creature's display of controlled violence. Her species had eliminated physical conflict from their society thousands of years ago. They won battles through superior technology and overwhelming firepower, not hand-to-hand combat with wild beasts. Commander, Officer Kellen finally spoke, his voice uncertain. Should we continue recording the subject's activities? Vexara nodded slowly, still transfixed by the human below. Yes. Document everything. The High Command must see this. Jake pulled out a small first aid kit from his backpack and began treating his wounds. Each movement was methodical and practiced, as if fighting deadly predators was just another part of his routine. He cleaned the cuts with antiseptic, applied bandages where needed, and checked for any serious injuries. The aliens watched him work with growing unease. What disturbed them most was how quickly Jake recovered from the life-or-death struggle. Within minutes of killing the bear, his heart rate had returned to normal levels. His breathing was steady. His movements showed no signs of trauma or shock. To the Zephyrians, who would need weeks of psychological treatment after witnessing such violence, this rapid recovery seemed almost supernatural. Jake began working on the bear's carcass with practiced efficiency. He had hunted before and knew how to properly field-dress large game. The aliens recorded every step as he used his knife to skin the animal and cut away usable meat. Nothing was wasted. The hide would provide materials for repairs or warmth. The meat would supplement his food supplies for the rest of his journey. Analysis of the subject's behavior indicates this was not an unusual event for his species, reported Zethra. His actions suggest extensive experience with similar situations. Commander Vexara felt a cold fear creeping into her thoughts. If this Jake Morrison was typical of his species, then everything the Zephyrian Empire believed about Earth was wrong. Their invasion plans assumed they would face a primitive civilization that could be easily overwhelmed. But primitives did not fight apex predators with handheld weapons and win. She activated the quantum communication system and sent an urgent message to the High Command. The response came back within hours, and it was not what she expected. The invasion fleet would continue its approach. One unusual human did not represent an entire species. Jake Morrison must be an aberration, perhaps one of their elite warriors or a genetic mutation. The High Command ordered Vexara to observe human military installations and cities to gather more realistic intelligence about Earth's actual capabilities. But, when the Silent Talon sensors turned toward human population centers, what they found only deepened the mystery. In cities around the world, humans engaged in activities that defied Zephyrian understanding. They watched recreational combat sports where individuals fought each other for entertainment. They observed military training exercises where soldiers practiced the same lethal skills Jake had displayed. They recorded extreme sports where humans deliberately put themselves in dangerous situations for no apparent reason other than personal satisfaction. The pattern was unmistakable. Jake Morrison was not unique among his species. He was ordinary. Combat training facilities. The aliens watched human soldiers learn to fight with weapons, without weapons, and against multiple opponents simultaneously. They saw police officers trained to face armed criminals with nothing but their bodies and basic equipment. They observed firefighters rush into burning buildings to save strangers, and rescue workers rappel down cliffs to reach injured hikers. Every human society on Earth seemed to produce individuals willing to face overwhelming odds and life-threatening situations as part of their normal lives. The Zephyrians had assumed that intelligent species naturally evolved beyond such dangerous behaviors. Instead, they discovered that humans had turned controlled violence and calculated risk-taking into art forms. Commander, we have completed analysis of major human population centers, reported Kellen. The data suggests that the subject Jake Morrison represents average capabilities for his species, not exceptional ones. Vexara studied the reports with growing alarm. Human children played games that simulated combat and competition. Their entertainment media glorified individuals who fought against impossible odds and won through determination and skill. Their history was filled with accounts of ordinary people accomplishing extraordinary things when faced with desperate situations. The aliens had been planning to conquer a world of warriors, who did not even realize they were warriors. She sent another urgent communication to the High Command, this time with detailed sensor data from multiple human locations. The response took longer to arrive, and when it came, the tone had changed completely. Fleet Admiral Kethvor himself had reviewed the intelligence reports. New orders were being transmitted to the invasion fleet immediately. Jake Morrison finished processing the bear meat and packed it carefully in his backpack. He had turned a deadly encounter into a source of food and materials, waste nothing, and gaining everything possible from the situation. As the sun began to set, he made camp near the site of his battle, apparently unconcerned about attracting other predators with the scent of blood. The aliens watched him build his fire and prepare his evening meal, which now included fresh bear steaks. He ate with obvious satisfaction, as if the meat tasted better because he had earned it through combat. This casual attitude toward violence and danger represented everything the Zephyrian Empire was not equipped to handle. Commander Vexara received the new orders just as Jake was settling down for the night. The invasion fleet had been recalled. After 2,000 years of successful conquest, the Zephyrian Empire was retreating from a primitive world because one ordinary human had fought a bear and won. The orders were classified at the highest levels. Earth was to be reclassified from conquest target to observation only. No Zephyrian ship was to approach within 1 light-year of the human system without explicit authorization from the High Command. The species that could produce individuals like Jake Morrison was too dangerous to face in open conflict. As Jake Morrison slept peacefully beside his campfire, surrounded by the wilderness that had tested him and found him worthy, he had no idea that his simple camping trip had just saved his entire world from alien invasion. Tomorrow he would continue his journey through the mountains, never knowing that invisible watchers had learned to fear his kind. 3 months into deep space, Fleet Admiral Kethvor received the most unusual orders in Zephyrian military history. The massive invasion fleet, comprising over 500 warships and 2 million soldiers, was to immediately reverse course and return to home space. The target world Earth had been reclassified from conquest priority to extreme danger zone. The Admiral read Commander Vexara's complete report 3 times before he could accept what it contained. A single human male, armed with primitive tools, had defeated one of his planet's apex predators in single combat. More disturbing were the follow-up observations showing that such capability was normal among the human population. The species the Empire had planned to enslave was actually a world full of individual warriors. Navigation, plot a return course. To Zephyrian space, the Admiral ordered. Maximum speed. Send word to all ship commanders that Operation Earthstrike is permanently cancelled. The fleet began its long journey home, carrying with it the knowledge that somewhere in the galaxy existed a species too dangerous for even the mighty Zephyrian Empire to face. The official records would show that Earth had been found unsuitable for conquest due to environmental factors. The truth would be classified beyond the highest security levels. Back on Earth, Jake Morrison woke to his 4th day in the wilderness, completely unaware that he had become the most famous human in the galaxy. He stretched beside his campfire and looked out at the mountain peaks surrounding his camp. The morning air was clean and cold, filled with the scent of pine trees and melting snow. This was exactly what he had needed after too many months of deployment overseas. He packed his gear with the same methodical care he brought to everything in his life. Military training had taught him that small details could mean the difference between life and death. In combat zones, a poorly secured pack could rattle and give away your position. In the wilderness, forgotten equipment could leave you helpless when weather turned bad. Jake Morrison survived because he never took chances with the basics. The aliens continued to watch him through their micro-drones, still gathering intelligence even though the invasion had been canceled. Commander Vexara wanted to understand as much as possible about this remarkable species before her ship departed Earth's solar system forever. Jake's behavior over the next few days only reinforced everything the Zephyrians had learned about humans. He encountered 2 more potentially dangerous situations during his journey, and handled both with the same calm competence he had shown against the bear. On the 5th day, he came across a cliff face that blocked his planned route. Most species would have found an alternate path or given up entirely. Jake studied the rock wall for several minutes, testing handholds and planning his ascent. Then he climbed straight up the vertical stone face using nothing but his hands, feet, and determination. The aliens recorded every moment of the hour-long climb, amazed that any creature would voluntarily risk death for the simple goal of continuing forward. On the 6th day, Jake's path crossed a raging mountain stream swollen with snowmelt. The water was deep, fast, and cold enough to kill within minutes. Again, most intelligent beings would have searched for a safer crossing or waited for conditions to improve. Jake tied a rope around his waist, secured the other end to a strong tree, and waded directly into the deadly current. He used the rope as a safety line while fighting his way across step by step, never showing fear of the water that tried to sweep him away. The subject continues to demonstrate complete disregard for personal safety when pursuing his objectives, reported Officer Zethra. His risk assessment capabilities appear fundamentally different from any known species. Commander Vexara had reached her own conclusions about human risk assessment. These creatures did not avoid danger the way normal species did. Instead, they calculated acceptable levels of risk and proceeded regardless of potential consequences. It was a mindset that had allowed them to dominate their planet, despite lacking natural weapons or armor. It was also a mindset that made them absolutely terrifying as potential enemies. Jake completed his week-long journey on schedule, emerging from the wilderness at a small ranger station where he had left his truck. He looked exactly like thousands of other humans who used the park system for recreation. Nothing about his appearance suggested that he had just accomplished something that would be considered legendary by most galactic civilizations. The park ranger on duty greeted Jake with casual friendliness. "Have a good trip up there? See anything interesting?" Jake loaded his pack into the truck and considered the question. Ran into a big bear on the 3rd day. Had to convince him to find somewhere else to eat his berries. The ranger laughed. "Yeah. They can be stubborn about their favorite spots. Glad you knew how to handle it safely." The casual nature of this conversation horrified the listening aliens. To them, Jake had just described a battle to the death with a massive predator. To his fellow humans, it was apparently such a routine occurrence that it barely warranted discussion. The cultural disconnect was so vast that the Zephyrians wondered if they would ever truly understand this species. Jake drove home to his small apartment in Montana, unpacked his gear, and returned to his normal life as a wilderness guide. Over the following weeks, he would lead groups of tourists through the same mountain areas where he had battled the bear. His clients would trust him to keep them safe in dangerous territory, never knowing that their guide had recently proved his capabilities in the most direct way possible. The Silent Talon departed Earth's orbit 3 days later, carrying with it complete records of Jake Morrison's wilderness adventure. The ship would take up a permanent monitoring station at the edge of the solar system, watching humanity from a safe distance and sending regular reports back to Zephyrian Command. Years passed. Humanity developed better technology and eventually achieved faster-than-light travel. When humans finally encountered the Zephyrian Empire, the first meeting was carefully arranged to take place in neutral space, with extensive diplomatic protocols. Jake Morrison, now retired from guiding and working as a park ranger, was invited to attend the historic first contact ceremony as an honored representative of human outdoor recreation. He had no idea why the alien seemed so interested in his camping experiences, but he was happy to share stories about Earth's wilderness areas. The Zephyrian delegation presented him with their highest medal for contributions to interspecies peace. Jake accepted the honor with characteristic humility, still not understanding that his simple camping trip had prevented a war before it could begin. Commander Vexara, now promoted to admiral, shook Jake's hand during the ceremony. She looked into the eyes of the human who had changed the course of galactic history and saw exactly what she expected. Jake Morrison was a perfectly ordinary member of his species, friendly and modest, with no idea how extraordinary that made him. "Thank you for showing us who humanity really is," she told him quietly. Jake smiled and shrugged. "Just tried to enjoy the mountains. Nothing special about that." That, Admiral Vexera realized, was the most terrifying thing any human could possibly say.